Hi everyone. The topic for today's class is economic rent and producer surplus in the long run. Economic rent, as the word suggests, it's arising out of some economy, some of the benefit which one of the firm has over the another firm. Imagine that there is some locational advantage to some firm which might help that particular firm to actually rope in some cost advantages. So maybe a firm is located very near to a railway station, so it might be able to transport the goods at quite a cheaper rate vis-a-vis some other firm which actually is located quite far from the railway station. And likewise, there could be economic rent or maybe such opportunities arising on the part of us as well. So a very classic example of economic rent could be, for example, I put up in Gurgaon and my home is in a very urbanized area, so there's a good amount of locational value attached with the plot over which my home is being built. So vis-a-vis any other house which was produced with the same inputs in the other part of, let's say, Delhi, might not be as as economically higher in the price as is my home. So economic rent reflects that anything which is arising because of some advantage with one which one entity has over another, that could be arising in terms of location, and it could also arise on account of some specialized inputs. So it could be, for example, one of the firms has some specialized input which allows that firm to reduce its costs as against any other firm who has to produce that particular good at a higher cost. And for example, that particular firm might have a patent over some of the technology which is actually cost saving in itself. So given enough examples of economic rent, I would like to give you a very specific definition which is unfortunately not here in this paragraph, so you might want to write it. Economic rent involves excess returns that result from some kind of artificial advantage. You see, so economic rent are nothing but some excess returns, and which are arising purely because of some artificial advantage which one of the entity has over another. And economic rent as a concept was also given by David Ricardo, who is a classical economist. And in his words, I would say economic rent is any payment. Economic rent is any payment made or benefit received. You see, economic rent is any payment made or benefit received for non-produced inputs such as location, and for assets formed by creating official privilege over natural opportunities. So you see, so it's sort of a benefit received or sort of a payment made only on account of something which you don't own. For example, the railway station near my firm is not something I own, but it's just my locational advantage. You see, so that way economic rent also reflects the idea of Ricardo, who actually developed this concept. We'll take a very good example from this book to understand economic rent, then we'll develop on producer surplus in the long run. So we have seen that some firms earn higher accounting profit than others because they have access to factors of production that are in limited supply. These might include land and natural resources, entrepreneurial skill, or other creative talent. So, as I said, that economic rent also arises only on the account of some specialized input. So, input which is in limited supply also. In these situations, what makes economic profit zero in the long run is the willingness of other firms to use the factors of production that are in limited supply. So the positive accounting profits are therefore translated into economic rent that is earned by the scarce factors. So let's try to understand through an example, and I'll explain you what it really tries to convey. So it has given an example of two firms. One firm is located, so both the firms initially own the land over which they are located. Okay, so the cost of land to both the firms is in effect zero. So two firms in industry own their land outright, thus the minimum cost of obtaining the land is zero. One firm, however, is located on a river and can ship its products for 10,000 a year less than another firm. You see, this is the advantage I was talking about. Just because that firm, let's say firm A, is located on a river, is able to cut down its transportation cost by rupees 10,000 a year. It's using the same input, whatever is going into the production. It's located on one land only, just like a firm B, which is located on another piece of land. But the only advantage this firm A has is in terms of the location. You see, so in this case, the 10,000, this particular 10,000 cost saving which is happening to firm A is like an economic rent. Now, when does it become an economic rent? Economic rent, definitional wise, is what firms are willing to pay for an input less the minimum amount necessary to buy it. Now see, the firm A, who is located on a river, is enjoying some cost saving, and that cost saving is equal to rupees 10,000 per year. Now there is a firm B and also maybe some other firms, and those are now willing to pay this particular firm A an amount equal to 10,000, so as to acquire this particular land which this firm owns. You see, so economic rent is what firms are willing to pay. The firm B is willing to pay for an input less the minimum amount necessary to buy it. Now minimum amount necessary to buy for firm B is zero, because otherwise it owns the land itself. No, firm B also has a land. So it means that firm B, if at all, has to buy a land. Why would he buy a land? All right, so the firm B owns the land outrightly, so the cost of land to that firm B is zero. But there is a cost which this firm B is willing to pay to firm A in order to acquire what this firm A already has, that advantage. So that is economic rent. You see, so 10,000 minus 0 becomes the economic rent, that is 10,000. Now this firm A, which is located on a river, was otherwise enjoying some high accounting profits. Why so? Because 10,000 cost was being saved clearly. So the accounting books of firm A were doing very good. They were showing some profits which were stepped up by 10,000 rupees. So in a way, can I say that this particular firm A also had in mind that it was paying some 10,000 land rent in order to reap those advantages by being located on a river. There is a land rent associated with being located on the river. So that firm A located on the river, in a way, is paying 10,000 to be on that river, just assumingly in its mind. So it's not showing up on the accounting accounts, but it's just in the firm's mind now, that these 10,000 rupees are like a cost, which I am paying my land in order to give me this particular advantage. Now you see, the land rent which this firm A, being located on a river, is paying, that is 10,000, is exactly equal to the 10,000 rupees the firm B is now willing to pay firm A in order to acquire this land advantage. So firm A now has a confusion. Firm A thinks that there is an opportunity cost. I already am making some benefits which amount to rupees 10,000. And in my mind, I am incurring a land rent for this which is 10,000. And there is a firm B outside who is exactly ready to pay me this amount of 10,000. So you see, the difference between the 10,000 which firm A had in mind as a land rent and the 10,000 which firm B is now willing to pay this firm A, that is economic rent, sums out to be 0. That means firm A ends up making an economic profit that is equal to 0. Why so? Because this firm A thought that there's an opportunity cost and it could actually sell out its particular land for rupees 10,000, because 10,000 was the economic rent. So because this opportunity cost becomes a part of economic profits, the economic profits in a way end up to be zero. Fine. So that was the idea of economic rent, which explains you that why one or the other firms may be able to make high accounting profits, but those are only arising on account of some advantage which they have. Okay. And the advantage gets reflected through a sort of economic rent, which although isn't paid to them, you see, economic rent is not something which is being paid to them, but only acts like an opportunity cost. Like the firm A on the river started thinking, it got confused one day that firm B is willing to pay me 10,000 rupees, and 10,000 is what I save. So it's like 10,000 minus 10,000 is zero. What do I make? I make nothing. You see, so that was the idea of economic rent. And a very simple example of economic rent is me putting up in Gurgaon, nearby metro station and good malls, and it's a good locality. And I bought a house for, let's say, 10 crores. Oh, that's too much of an amount though. It really is, yeah. So I bought a house for, let's say, 10 crores, and there is a friend of mine who puts up in in some part of Delhi, and he also bought a house for 10 crores. So both of us initially are starting off to stay in our houses, which otherwise costed 10 crores. But the moment the malls started building nearby my house, and then a metro line also was made, my house's value now, right now, if I go to sell it up in the market, is 25 crores. As against my friend who stays in Delhi, he is able to sell his house for 20 crores. So if he sells his house for 20 crores, it means he would make a profit of 10 crores. And if I sell my house for 25 crores, I'm going to make a profit of 15 crores. So this 15 minus the 10 crore which my friend made profit, that is 5 crores, is actually an economic rent which I earned just by staying in a house which is situated in an urban part of Gurgaon. You see? So economic rent just accrued to me. Fine, in my mind, I didn't receive it from my friend. You see, economic rent wasn't received by me from my friend. It just accrued to me in a way. So which is why it is called that these are the excess returns that result from some kind of artificial advantage, which is not because the firm, so maybe the firm had created it by buying some patent or innovating something, but most often it arises because of something which the firm does not own also in a way. So the locational advantage was nothing. So I didn't build the metro, I didn't build the malls, but in a way I gained. So that's economic rent for you all. Now let's go about studying producer surplus in the long run. Okay. To begin with, while economic rent applies to factor inputs because these arise on account of some inputs. Okay? Alright. Producer surplus applies to outputs. You remember what was producer surplus? Producer surplus was merely the difference between market price and the marginal cost. Okay. So let's try to understand what all of it is through an example. And we shall be able to prove that in the long run, in a competitive market, the producer surplus that a firm earns on the output it sells consists of the economic rent that it enjoys from all of its scarce inputs. So now let's say there's an example that a baseball team in the US has a franchise allowing it to operate in a particular city. Suppose also that only alternative location for the team in the city is in which it will generate substantially lower returns. It's like there's a baseball team, and in the US it has a franchisee, so that baseball team can choose to operate in two of the cities, but in one city where it is actually choosing to operate gives the baseball team higher revenues. So why does it happen? So let's say the two cities are city A and city B. Now, city A is a smaller city, some moderately sized city. And because it's a moderately sized city, not many people you can expect to turn up for baseball matches. So, not many profits can you expect of making from, from baseball matches. But in city B, where the size of the city is quite big, that means you can actually expect a lot of people turning up as audiences. That means you can charge them higher amount also and make good profits. So that's the idea conveyed over here. Now, the advantage which the baseball team has to operate in the large city is only arising because the city has a larger population. Simple. Now, this shall help this particular baseball team to earn some economic rent. Now, let's see what it is. Now, this is a case of moderately sized city, and as we can see, this is the long run average cost curve. This is the long run marginal cost curve, and the classic long run profit maximization says that the competitive firm will choose to produce an output at which price is equal to marginal cost is equal to average cost. So that's this particular point, and this particular firm is then charging rupees 100 per ticket, and at 100 per ticket it makes 1 million ticket sales. Okay, so that is the amount of revenues this particular firm generates, and also these revenues are exactly equal to the cost, since this is also the long run average cost. So since revenue is the same as the cost, economic profits end up being zero. So for a moderately sized city in which there was no added advantage, the economic profits made by that firm is actually zero. Now let's consider a larger city. What happens in a large city? Because in a large city more people are going to come to see the baseball games, there the team can choose to sell tickets at a higher price. So that means it chooses to sell the ticket for 150 rupees. Now this difference between 150 and 110, which is happening over here, is actually economic rent. You see, the average cost here was 110 in this particular city, and 150 is the price which it chooses to charge as a ticket. That means 40 rupees per ticket is something which is charged as an economic rent. Otherwise, in a moderately sized city, what could have been the price? The price is equal to AC is equal to MC. But we are not operating here. We are operating at a higher price. So we are operating at a price of 150. That means 150 minus 110, that 40 rupees represents average economic rent. You multiply 40 with these 1.3 billion tickets, million tickets being sold. This will translate into the total economic rent. And this is nothing but the increased profits. You see, so a firm, the baseball team operating over here, is earning higher profits by this margin only. And this margin is nothing but the increased accounting profits. It will show up on the accounting books now because it has a higher price. So 40 into this particular amount of tickets being sold means these are the accounting profits additional which are being earned by operating in a large city. Now again, what will happen? Though this firm is earning an economic rent, and in this particular scenario it was not, because here the long run economic profits were zero, and here we also know what's the producer surplus. Producer surplus is the difference between price and marginal cost. Okay, so producer surplus is in a way a bigger range. You see, if you map price here and this is your marginal cost, then this region is obviously bigger than the economic rent. So we have been able to prove this result also, that producer surplus consists of the economic rent. Okay, all right, so where was I was at a point where the baseball team is now here confused. Why confused? Because although it is earning an economic rent, but this economic rent is like an opportunity cost. What if any other firm operating in this moderate size city is ready to pay this firm exactly 40 rupees per ticket amount in order to acquire it? You see, so in order to acquire this particular franchisee, if somebody is willing to pay this firm exactly the amount equal to economic rent, then its economic profits will be driven to zero. In a way, it is also not making any added advantage. You see, and this result is being written over here, that however the rent associated with the more desirable location represents a cost to the firm, an opportunity cost because it could sell its franchisee to another team. As I said, somebody might be keen on buying out its franchisee. So, as a result, the economic profit in the larger city is also zero. So that was how we proved the same thing which we proved here also. That although economic rents do good, see, although economic rents do good to a firm in terms of inflating the accounting profits, the profits which show up on your accounting books. But if you start comparing these economic rent with the amount which will happen to you, which will accrue to you as an opportunity cost, then your economic profits also end up being zero. Because what are economic profit? Economic profits are accounting profits minus opportunity cost. So this opportunity cost is something which is being reflected by the economic rent, as is written over here, that the rent associated with the more desirable location represents a cost, because it's an opportunity cost, as this firm can always sell the franchisee to another team. So which is why economic profits get driven to zero here, and ultimately being in a moderate size city or large size city doesn't really matter. So that was about understanding economic rent and producer surplus in the long run. Thank you.